And I knew I was doing ministry for others, but there was another level there that I needed to fall down into that I just didn't have the vision to see it. And the Crucible weekend opened up a door to a whole new section of my life that was more around, I think, learning to lead myself at a deeper level and then learning to show the door for others who might be looking for the same thing.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hello and welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. My name is Tim Rush, and today we're talking about leadership. We are joined by my good friend, Chadd Schrader. Chadd Schrader is a missionary, farmer, teacher extraordinaire. So Chadd, thank you for being on this call today.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
So Chadd and I go way back. We met in 1990. I was a mission intern, joining a missionary internship program. 1990, Chadd, how old would you have been then?
I was 26 in 1990, but I remember you, I think in 89, before I got married. I think you were around as Nancy and I were in the last part of our engagement and getting married.
It's funny that you were 26-ish at the time, because in my mind, you were like 45. I think Chadd was born an adult.
Oh, I'm not sure if I like that.
Well, not the old man energy.
Yeah.
The wise sage energy. Chadd has experience living in England as a missionary intern, was a missionary in Mexico City for 5 years.
Mexico City, 5 or 6, between 5 and 6 years.
And then Guadalajara, 13 or so years. So Chadd has some experience. And part of that was getting the Crucible Project into Mexico. I don't know if you'd like to say anything about that experience.
Yeah, kind of feels in hindsight like that was the main fruit. Besides all the things that happened inside of me, it's where I start noticing real fruitfulness or just real joy coming up out of all those years of us learning together in Mexico. We started that at the end of 2014 when we actually did our first weekend down there. Took 2 or 3 years previous to that to prepare and recruit bilingual people to do their own crucible. But that has been a beautiful experience in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, in December of 2024, y'all had your 10th anniversary retreat.
That's right. We're at the place where I think someone said 413 or 418 men have done Crucible weekends in Mexico in these last 10 years.
That is just amazing. Chadd has always been a leader extraordinaire. When I entered into this missions program, Chadd was one of the leaders in the program. But I'm curious, when did your leadership journey start? Like, when did you turn around and realize that people were following you?
I was raised by a really strong leader of a dad. I got so much from him. And then in those early years, I was told that I was a leader. I was, groomed to be a leader by mentors and going to college at Abilene Christian and all of those things. But I think when I started noticing would have been probably in those years when I met you, the mission program that we were a part of, beginning to notice that, there were others, either peers or for sure a year or 2 or 3 or 4 behind, who were interested in being led by me. So I think that was probably in those years. Earlier than that, I was kind of doing whatever I was supposed to do. I was just following the script. And maybe in my early to mid 20s, I began to discover a little more passion about what I was made to do, and certainly not clear about it. But I think that's when I began to be clear about where I was going or saw where I wanted to go.
Yeah. When you look back on that period of life, is there anything that you can own that, I was doing this well from the beginning?
Yeah, I think so. I learned some good things from my mom and dad and from some early mentors. And of course, it's just grace. But I think I had an ability real early on to have vision, like I was able to figure out metaphorically the game, what it is that we're trying to do here. I could see it and articulate it. And I've always been pretty good and was pretty good early on. Once I saw it, I could come up with a plan to get there. And then my dad instilled in me a really strong work ethic. I knew how to see it and I knew how to come up with the plan, and I knew how to go for it. So I had some success. I wonder if some of my leadership really was that people saw me apparently having some success and wanted to be a part of that. I was always good with people, and my mom taught me to be good with people. And so I think that combination helped my leadership early on.
I love you mentioning your dad being a strong leader and your mom showing you how to interact with people, because I got to know your parents a few years after meeting you, and man, I just love them. And I see both of those things. Like your dad, I mean, he's a different leader. He's a gruff bulldog of a leader, and offset by your mom's just, oh my goodness, complete care and pastoral love around her coffee table. So that's cool that you live out both of those in a different way, but both of those are true.
Yeah. Thank you. I love them. My mom has passed, but yeah, I often think about my formation, and I don't know how either one of them would have done in another situation. I mean, how I would have flourished, but I think somehow the combination of the two of them together did produce some good stuff in me. Probably some bad stuff too, but some good stuff.
And as you're talking, I can also see how God was forming you. And I know you did a lot more in Mexico than bring the Crucible Project into Mexico, but setting out a vision. It was you and James Henderson that noticed we have to do something different for the men in Mexico. And then it took a lot of vision casting and setting a pace.
It felt very much like a calling. It felt like a challenge. It felt exciting, and it was just clear that was what it felt like we were supposed to do. And the team came together, and those are just really, really fun years that we've had together.
I can also remember back as an 18-year-old, long before I learned how to do these things, you having hard conversations with me. Like I remember an early morning breakfast where you challenged me like, hey, is this really what you're about? Or do you want to set your vision differently? And so it seems like, man, that was a precursor to a lot of this work that we would step into, learning how to be honest with each other.
Absolutely.
So when you look back, is there anything that comes up for you that you think I needed to learn and I needed to grow in a specific area? And if so, how did you come to realize that there was growth needed?
I mean, definitely those years when I was becoming a missionary and marrying Nancy and we were moving to Mexico, it was almost like it was a playground for me. And I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and it was a challenge and learning language and culture and the whole idea of being a missionary and playing with the idea of church planting and all of that. It was so much like I could see what we were supposed to be doing and what others wanted me to do. And my supporters were just good people, and I could see what they wanted and how we were going to do that. And I had a thirst to learn how, so I was reading a lot and diving into it all. I noticed that I looked around, and although I felt really good about things, sometimes others who were with me on the journey maybe weren't as completely fulfilled as I was. Especially, I think early I saw that in Nancy. These were just great, great years. We were having our babies, and then someone would ask us how it's going, and she mentioned these were tough years. It was really tough. And so that was one of the early red flags that came up that, I didn't know that. So just that awareness, beginning to be aware of me as the protagonist of this story that I was living. There was more to it than that, and becoming more aware of the we instead of just the me.
So I can imagine it feeling risky to pursue that. And the easiest thing would be to think, she said that, but she didn't mean it, or it wasn't as strong as I sensed it. So how did you take that risk of stepping into the hard conversations or the self-examination? What was going on there?
I mean, I remember the time we were moving from being missionaries in Mexico City, and our girls were 3 or 4 years old at the time. We were making a move from there to gathering a team of other families to jump over to Guadalajara, Mexico. I knew I wanted to be a part of team missions. And of course, these babies, these girls of mine were just amazing. And my relationship with Nancy was so important to me. And it was a time of making sure we were healthy enough to go on to the next phase of our mission work. I got a mentor and resource people to help walk us through that. And not that it hadn't happened earlier than this, but I began to think about the idea of team missions, team ministry, and what leadership would look like among a team of friends. But I think the preparation to be a healthy team allowed me to look at myself, think about, okay, what kind of teammate will I be? And by the way, what kind of husband and dad am I being? So it began to open up my mind to other perspectives. How are others experiencing that? How about my teammates? How about my wife? How about Mexicans that are in the middle of this with me? What about my supporters? What about my daughters? So the idea of awareness, becoming more aware of people besides just me.
Yeah, so you're stepping out of your own self and getting the perspective of those around you. My guess is it starts coming online that people aren't all made the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was always really curious and always wanting to take another course, another class. I decided to do some graduate work and missions and theology. And there was this time where the part of me that knew how to win this game, how to be successful, it began to clash, that there was more than one perspective, or there was more than one set of expectations, more than one set of rules, and wrestling with that awareness and how I could be successful as a leader in each of those realms with my teammates, as a missionary in Mexico, as a good dad and husband, as a friend to my coworkers, as faithful to the ones who would send me. It was a really big challenge, and sometimes it began to be more than I could handle.
So the story I tell myself is that it had to have felt like people were putting on the brakes when you see a big vision and are ready to go for it, and then you have people who don't catch it yet or think it should go a different way. How did that work for you? How was it to work with a team and share vision and process?
So many parts of it were just a beautiful experience over all those years of ministry with friends, raising our children together. The Mexican people are just beautiful people, deep, deep friendships. My little girls were growing up in the middle of that, and we had adopted Ceci, and so many, 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 many beautiful experiences there and challenges. On the one hand, it was a challenge. In all of that, I just kept thinking, surely I can figure out a way to articulate a vision, to make it clear the plan that would be all things to all these different groups of people, supporters and family and coworkers, the Mexican leaders and people that I love so much, and my own self and my family. I think that it was a challenge, and it felt like a cool challenge that surely we can do. But then the further we went along, it increasingly became frustrating, and I began to feel like I couldn't be in integrity with all of those people at the same time. I couldn't please, which was very important to me. I couldn't please all those people at the same time and feel like I had integrity inside of myself. And it felt like that came to a place where it really was a breaking point.
So for our listener, let me say, Chadd and my stories intersected about 5 years into his time in Guadalajara, and our family joined the Schraders, and we worked together 7 or 8 years in Guadalajara. So there's a lot of backstory that I know that we don't need to unpack all of, but I'm sitting with the perspective of, oh yeah, I remember this story, and I remember struggles and real life colliding. So the story I tell myself is there were people wanting to drive the mission that weren't involved in the mission, or they weren't living the mission with you.
There were so many beautiful people involved in my and our life during those years. They were just good friends, good people. And I think that there was a tendency on my part, and perhaps on several of our parts early on, to kind of see truth with a big T. There's big truth. There's what's right and wrong. If you study your Bible and you think clearly, you have big truth. You know what's right. In those years, it became more clear that good-hearted supporters back in Texas, what big truth for them was, and what truth was for Mexicans, and maybe what truth looks like for women and my daughters, what truth is for others who are either teammates or coworkers in some way or the other. Although we had a whole lot in common, there were areas that almost were deal breakers for each of those categories. And as someone who was trying to lead and who has a pretty good sense of vision, when it gets to the point where I know I'm going to lose, I want to quit. And it was becoming clear to me in those years that this was not a winnable one. I couldn't win with my Mexican friends, with my coworker friends, with my supporter friends, and with those dear women in my life. I was worried that I was not going to be able to figure this out and lead all of us to a good place on the other side. And that was really hard.
And you mentioned there's so many different levels of leadership, like leading your daughters, leading with Nancy, leading a church, leading a mission team, being viewed from supporters back home as the missionary. Like, how do you handle that, one, in a public space, and how do you handle that internally?
That's a good question. It was just hard. It felt really hard, and it helped me become aware of a lot of anxiety. For the first time in my life, I got to a place where I couldn't sleep at night. And I would wake up in the middle of the night worrying about, couldn't figure out a path through this. And it felt like this was not going to turn out well. In those months, God provided an off-ramp, and I was able to see it clearly enough that I could take the risk, step away for a minute and hopefully get my bearings and make some decisions. In our mission in Mexico, a lot of good seeds had been planted and were growing. And my older daughters were at an age where it was appropriate for us to help them move back to the U.S. And so in that moment, we were able to push the pause button and reorient ourselves.
What comes up for you around the idea of leading yourself through all this chaos? You haven't used this word, but I've heard described a narrative wrecker, when you're living this story and everything from your past and your future is involved in this narrative, and suddenly find yourself going, what did all of this mean? And so how do you lead yourself when you find yourself in the crossroads of a place you weren't expecting to be in?
I'm not sure I have a wise answer. For me, it's so hard to look back and be clear what I'm reading back into my story and what was going on at the time. I think that God was really graceful for me. I had a deep love for God, and I had clarity about a lot of spiritual practices that just were lifesavers for me over the years. And so being able to step back didn't feel like a failure. It felt like a spiritual discipline. It felt like a grace. But it was on that time of stepping back that I went to a Crucible weekend. For several months, a friend of mine had been saying that I ought to go. It felt like to help us be better ministers. But it was during that time that I went to my initial weekend with Crucible. For the first time, it helped me think that there was something deeper, what I've come to call now soul work. It's not that I wasn't doing soul work before, but I don't think I had a vision for that work inside of me. I knew I was growing, and I knew I was practicing spiritual disciplines, and I knew I was doing ministry for others, but there was another level there that I needed to fall down into that I didn't have the vision to see it. And the Crucible weekend, it opened up a door to a whole new section of my life that was more around, I think, learning to lead myself at a deeper level, and then learning to show the door for others who might be looking for the same thing.
So what sort of fruit do you see from that journey now, standing on this side of it?
I think there's been a whole lot of fruit, and it's a good question to try to unpack a little. Initially, the first thing I think about is freedom, just feeling a freedom to understand that I don't have to please everyone. I can be free to explore what I really want and what I believe God really wants. Crucible allowed me to begin to put internal boundaries with a part of me that wants to please and that almost can't be okay if others are not pleased. So that was just huge. I think there's also a growing awareness. I think the fruit has been an awareness of all kinds of things going on down inside of me, resistances and deep desires, the work of God in my heart. I think the work I began to do with Crucible opened up a door to explore a whole lot of those things for myself. And then that allowed me to be more focused on what I really want and don't want in this stage of my life. It helped me make some shifts as my parents were growing older and as my daughters were moving into adulthood. And then it also just focused my vocation on what I believe I'm made to do with my life. So all of that happened over years, but I really do believe the fruit of going to a Crucible weekend has really opened up a whole new door. For the most part, is just full of blessings.
One thing that stands out to me that I feel like I keep hearing is healing, that there was a level of healing that wasn't on your radar that now is a part of your story, and not just your story, but when I look at you, I see micro and macro level healing. Sitting around your table with your family, with your wife and daughters, it's a place where you're accepted, and healing is a part of the cup of coffee and dinner. And then think of the macro level. I wish we could add a picture to this podcast. The Spanish weekends in Houston, I think the first weekend they started passing out flags at the end of the weekend that men could grab the flag that represented where they were from. And there are, 8 to 15 flags in each one of those photos representing where this work is going and the families of where it's going. So man, micro and macro level, I honor you, Chadd, because this is hard work. And at any point you could have said, I'm going to do something different. But instead you've dug into the hard work of healing. And now you and Nancy and your girls provide that for so many others.
Thank you. I want that to be true.
It's really an amazing journey to look back to see what we thought was the most important thing 35 years ago and where we sit today, basking in what we get to do and what we get to be a part of. So fun journey. If you had one mic drop of wisdom that you would want to leave, no pressure, by the way.
I'm not sure if it's mic drop kind of wisdom, but you are deeply loved by God, and everything you need to grow to be all that God wants you to be it's available to you. It's right there. Look for ways to wake up. Look for ways to go deep and to explore how deeply God loves you, how much grace and blessing there is in finding freedom to follow Jesus and God with everything you have. I think there's different on-ramps to that. There's different ways to get there with God, and God's just so merciful. But look for a way, look for a door to go to that place and become more aware of what's going on.
Thank you. I will let that be the last word because that's really beautiful. Thank you, Chadd. Thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.